anyway, and everybody's seeing everybody else's name, I assume.
Yes.
Okay, so we don't need to introduce each other. And we're going to start out with first topic, martial artist outside the dojo, how it affects our real lives, either physically, psychologically, or philosophically. Anyone want to delve into that? Or
I'll take it to start with, just to give us something to jump in on. So I always like to, so to me, when we talk about any martial art, to me, they're the same. So when I talk about understanding karate or jujitsu, to me, they're the same thing. So what philosophically applies to one does to the others too, because they're parts of each other, right? Like we've talked about before. But so anyway, getting to the point here, in karate, there are certain precepts and certain concepts. Actually, on my wall right there, right above my hand there. But those precepts, one of them that Funakoshi laid out, is that your karate training is not just for karate training. Your karate training is for your entire life. And the lessons you learn in karate are to be applied to your everyday life. And that's the true meaning of karate mastery. So that's like a stated principle in karate, that you should be applying that training to your everyday life.
Okay,
so I think that's kind of how I see it.
Okay, are you talking about attitudinally or perspective?
Well, I think it's anything, right? It's so like in doing a wrist throw, right? So if I'm way larger than a smaller person, right? Obviously, if they're smaller. So if a smaller person and I are engaged, it's very easy for me to put them in a wrist lock using strength, right? I can just grab their wrist, yank them towards me, pull them to my waist, twist the wrist, and throw them down. They can't pull me towards them. Like, they will never be able to do that wrist lock. They can't pull me to their center and off balance me, but they can step towards me, right? So if they take a step towards me and put my hand at their center, the same effect is pulling me towards them and putting my hand at their center. So a lesson like that, you apply in a meeting at work, or in an argument about something on an airplane, or a customer service issue, or whatever. You take a step towards your opponent instead of trying to pull them towards you, and applying that in life. The lesson you learned in the dojo, you can apply outside of it. I think that's kind of the spirit.
Yeah, I like to expand on what Dane is saying. I without ever reading anything from anyone, it at some point in time throughout my martial arts journey, I've absolutely believe in that. I apply martial arts in every aspect of my everyday life and everything that I do, not only physically, but mentally and spiritually as well. And that's some prime examples that Dane was giving out. He was given a physical example, but I mean, then he kind of alluded to some of the mental capacity as well, and how you deal with different scenarios in everyday life. It doesn't have to be about the physical aspect of it, but it could be how you manage your ability to cope with other people, other scenarios, other things that are going on in your life, whether it be business, personal, or even sports. And then if you get into the physical thing, there's so many things in martial arts that are attributed to martial arts training. And I think that's where the higher level of understanding of martial arts begins, is that people overlook that all of the time. They think most people think it's just the physical aspect of martial arts. And it's so much more. It has such a broader perspective on how it's applied in everyday life.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in? I know when I think there's how do you say it? When people find out what I know and what level I'm at in jujitsu, they say, particularly when I was a teacher, they said, "You're a black belt? You do martial arts?" Because I think people assume that a person who is a martial artist is in excellent physical shape. They stand 6'15". They they have these supernatural powers. And one thing that martial arts training has allowed me to do is to be more humble. And I don't have to, how do you say it, show other people what I am or what I've got, whatever, what I've got or my capabilities. They discover them as we proceed on in life. And I think that attitude has come from partially from my martial arts training. It's kind of like, again, going back to, as Dane said, stepping into the person and bringing the wrist to your stomach. You put yourself. I lost my thought here. It's too early in the morning. It'll come back eventually, but
I think it's okay, Sensei. I mean, look, again, it's just to kind of help emphasize some of those things. The everyday life is much more than just the physical aspect, the physical training, the technique, the things that we're doing in class that you don't see. The growth in martial arts has so much more to do with the not only, again, you have a foundation of, and whatever reason anyone decides to ever start taking martial arts, but the foundation of being physically capable of being able to, let's say, defend yourself, because that obviously is probably the primary reason someone ever started doing it, right? And then maybe it's physical conditioning, like you had mentioned, but the part that people don't see is the part that you are growing mentally and spiritually, and how you can apply that to your everyday life and everything you're doing. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you do in a profession. It doesn't matter what you have that you encounter on a daily activity. You can apply your martial arts. And for the most part, for a long time, and I'm talking years, most people don't even realize that until they get to a much higher level and a better understanding of where it came from and how they were able to cope, adapt, apply, get whatever challenge scenario it may have been, whether it was physical, mental, or spiritually.
Okay. Hold on a second. I'm trying to get Thomas Salander up there, and he needs an invitation to the lake. And I don't wait. Well, wait a minute. He has Thomas. Have you joined? No, he's not on yet. Just give me a minute here. Let's see. How do I get back to it? Bear with me for a moment here. I'm not losing you, I hope. Response.
Sensei, do you have any comments you'd like to expand on? Just talking to everyone, Sensei. Keep going.
Okay, this will just take me a minute here as I emails.
Darren, were you asking a question? My computer volume went haywire for a minute.
Oh, I was just, I didn't know if you had, I thought you was trying to say something. I thought you may have made a comment or something.
It's interesting. You can read my face like few people, Darren. I was just having.
I heard that mentally,
I was just
telepathically. I heard that.
You and I have a connection. But anyways, I was just getting a kick out of the fact that because I didn't say anything, I get to know what Dane and Darren have to say about this without expressing what I know. So I was just feeling wealthier for that situation because by keeping my mouth shut, I know what I know, and I know what you guys know too.
I'm almost there. Just bear with me.
While he's doing that, Darren, I will share with you that I remember early on as a white belt, hearing my first sensei, karate sensei say, more than 90% of self-defense is between the ears.
Yes.
Came back to me today when you were talking about the not so obvious mental growth and spiritual growth of self-defense, and I never connected that with this until you mentioned that this morning. I'm saying, hey, yeah,
I agree on that. I also think that mental strength and then the mental strength and technique will win the physical strength in jiu-jitsu. So if you have the right attitude and the right technique, then you don't need the physical strength. I have a father who has Parkinson, and I learned in a few techniques, and me being younger and stronger, I couldn't actually do anything against his technique, even though I tried when he did it right. So mental strength and right technique will win the physical strength if you do it
Joni,
right.
I apply that to like a lot of days. If I'm spending a lot of time on the computer at work and I'm doing a lot of things that the screen is in front of me, right? I always say by the end of that day, I'm just exhausted just by sitting in front of the computer. And the exhaustion from working with doing very, very little physical activity is draining. And then when I'm in class, I feel like I can do so much more physically, and so I always say it takes a much higher level of understanding in your mental capacity than it does your physical capacity. A mental where you get mentally fatigued, you're done. It's just like you can't do anything else. Physically, you can almost recover a little bit to do a little bit more almost all of the time, right? And so if there's ever a thing to where, again, you attribute what you can push yourself past and how you can handle more, physically is just one thing, but mentally especially, and where you're able to obtain more, take on more, do a little bit more mentally, martial arts is certainly something that I attribute all of those things to. And then, as Dave mentioned, the part where, and I was saying it a couple of different times, when you're talking about the understanding of, it takes a higher level of someone to understand what's coming in, how you're applying the certain things that you're doing that is related to martial arts and your martial arts training mentally, when you don't understand that, because sometimes you just do them unconsciously until you get to that higher level to where you truly understand why you were able to do those things, and it's directly attributed to your martial arts background.
I agree with what you said. I think, and I'm going to go back to what I was talking to Dane about earlier, but my brain left. I think the issue is that when we are more competent or more comfortable with something, it is easier for us to, I'm going to use the word, help ourselves get to wherever we're going, or help someone else get to wherever we want them to go. Or, for example, smaller person stepping in towards the larger person is, in essence, he is helping the other person take the fall attitudinal approach. Or if you are in a class situation, whether you're training or you're training other students, because you are competent and have some confidence in what you're doing, you're able to succeed, and it's enervating. It's relaxing. It's why one reason I also enjoy doing yard work. No, I don't do lawns, but I enjoy all the other stuff because it's relaxing. It gives me time to think, and even if I'm teaching a class, I'm thinking, because it's how do you say, it frees your mind, and because and I think part of that ability to have a freer mind is a result of the training I received that makes me confident in my competence. And I think that can be applied to almost any field. But I think jiu-jitsu or martial arts training has helped me with that, because of the attitude of being humble. You know, you do not have to prove yourself. You can help. You know, you can help others without having to prove yourself.
That was something I was going to mention too. I couldn't find a tactful way to phrase it, but you know, through like randori and sparring, even and any of that stuff, you'll find you never get in a fight once you're aware of how you think you would really do in one. You know, like once you had the experience of actually competing with somebody, you probably walk away from fights. Like you have that concept of I don't need to challenge myself. I've done that. I know how confident I feel about myself, kind of a thing. You can walk away from an altercation instead of feeling that you have to prove something, you know, also. You've already proven it in the laboratory. You don't need to prove it here. You can walk away and call the bouncer over and just go home, you know. But if you hadn't had that experience, you're like, here's my chance. I wonder if I could take this guy, right? And that's gone when you've done that in the dojo. You get that kind of out of your system, and you're a lot more able to be realistic in the situation. Be like, well, now's not the time for that,
Right.
you know.
And you're more capable of being able to talk your way out of a, I'll say, tenuous situation, because you don't think you have to prove yourself. And that's where a lot of people get into trouble, is they feel they have to prove themselves, and their ego takes over. And you know, I've had people say to me at times, "Well, why didn't you speak out, or why didn't you do something?" And if I have to give an answer, I'll say it'll take care of itself, and it usually does. Not always, but it usually does. And you know, you don't have to be the person that solves every problem.
Right, Sensei, look, here's a couple of things, just in the little comment and a few comments that you and Dana just mentioned. Confidence, being able to free your mind. Actually, when you were saying free your mind, I was literally writing down being able to think clearly, relaxed thinking, attitude, being humble, ego. Dana mentioned conflict avoidance. And look back, you know, what's the main things that you learn in martial arts? All of those things are parts of what we do in development in martial arts, every single one of them.
Okay, great summary.
Yeah,
It's a proof of mental strength. If you don't have to do anything, it's a proof of your own mental strength. If you don't do anything, you are proud enough of yourself that you don't have to do anything back.
I sometimes, you know, say to some people, you know, if they ask, you know, say, you know, the toughest thing, and this discussion is an exception, because what we're trying to do is get everyone to talk and express themselves. But sometimes the toughest thing to do is to keep your mouth shut. and let the
Amen.
and let the, you know, let the flack go where it goes. And then ultimately, because you realize you will probably be able to walk away from this without being the receiver of any flack. And it's a hard concept for some people to accept, because they feel if they don't speak up, they failed, or whatever. I think failed is the right term, or they didn't stand up for themselves, or whatever term you want to use. I think one of the things that good martial arts training will do will get you to understand that you do not have to prove yourself, because you have the confidence that you probably can, I won't say can, you probably can protect yourself if you absolutely have to. And, you know, there's a certain confidence and peace that comes with that. Anybody else want to add in here? Good morning, Thomas.
Good morning, George. and company.
Glad you're with us. Any other, anybody else want to get in on this or say anything?
You know, one quick thing that just popped in is I think specifically to jujitsu too. You were talking about gardening. I think one other benefit is that it makes you, jujitsu is nothing but like living, breathing physics and mathematics, right? You know, you're finding centers of balance and tipping leverage and finding fulcrums, and you begin to do it like intuitively. Like you can just look at somebody and know how they're going to fall over the easiest. You know what I mean? And I think that falls into everyday life too, like carrying your grocery bags on slippery surfaces, you know, loading the back of your car, knowing how to distribute weight, things like that. Like I think you start having a living, breathing connection to like physics through jujitsu training too. Like you just don't put that there, that's going to fall. You know, you start seeing that very clearly, and other people really don't. Like, you know, that's going to tip. That's not stable.
It's
I like the comment, seeing it, Dane. You know, the fulcrum or leverage or the balance part of it. You can I can literally see things, you know, when other people are doing them, and you can almost prevent what may happen next just because you understand it better. I can certainly relate to that.
Dane, you got it. That's you hit it right on the head. There's a good point to that. When I was younger in my police career, if I had to investigate a traffic accident and that car had spun over or flipped over or split in half, you know, the jujitsu, the correlation is definitely there. Looking at the motion, which way that vehicle was going, and the weight of that vehicle beforehand, and then what caused it to change direction and redistribute. So yeah, that you're spot on.
Yeah. And it does apply, you know, it does, I think any martial art inevitably interacts with the rest of your life, because you do tend to look at things differently, and I think that's because regardless of martial arts, there's physics involved, there's mathematics involved, leverage and everything else, and you can pick up a different visual perspective of what's happening or what can happen. Some people call that insight. Some people just call it a judgment call. I'm sure there are other terms, you know.
Wisdom comes to no, I'm kidding.
But you know, I think it's an inevitable part of training, because in any martial art you are dealing with, I guess, off balancing your opponent, and what happens when something is off balance. And we all know that the only way you can get any technique to work in any martial art is to off balance your opponent. And it can be, if you want to call it verbal judo, you can off balance a person verbally. Or you can off balance them physically.
And balance is such a perfect choice to kind of wrap up this section, probably, because Mr. Miyagi in the Karate Kid, right, when he's talking to Daniel, he says, remember that lesson I taught you about balance in the boat where you don't fall over? It's like, you know, that lesson wasn't just about karate. That lesson's about your entire life. You have to find balance.
Yeah.
Right? And like how perfect to exactly what we're talking about. He's trying to get that through to Daniel. I'm not just teaching you how to punch high school kids.
Right. And that's, you know, that's it. And one of the nice things is that when you can achieve this balance, it brings balance to other parts of your life as well. And so you do seem to be, to others, maybe you do seem to be more at peace with yourself. And other people respect you for being at peace with yourself, because again, become more. I'd say people will ask you for help in a variety of ways because they see that you can handle life, so to speak. And so that's just, I don't know, that's one of the benefits or one of the prices of being at peace with yourself. But you find some people who, some people call it religious peace or philosophical peace or whatever else. But it's pretty obvious if someone is at ease, at balance or at peace or at ease with themselves. Because, and the word just came to mind, is that you've accepted yourself. And that doesn't mean that you accept yourself and you're perfect. It means that you've accepted, you know, you may have things to improve upon, work upon, all these other things, but you've accepted that and you recognize that. And that's hard for a lot of people. Hey, where's John? We lost you again. Okay. John. Okay, so anything else on this topic? Okay, is my screen frozen or are we all there?
We're all here.
Okay, maybe just kind of like still. Anyway, okay, next topic is even a fun one. And this one, Dane came up with the two of them. I think ultimately, we started with zanshin and mokuso. That I think was the initial startup here, if you have an outline in front of you. And then somehow I think I threw in, or he threw in, mushin. And then I rephrase it a little bit to which comes first. And it's a chicken or the egg concept. And just to start off, we have mushin means no mind, which means there's action without any conscious effort. You just do it. Ernest put on his shirt this morning. He buttoned it up. He didn't think about it. He just did it. That's mushin. Okay. Zanshin is empty mind. Your mind is ready, relaxed, ready for whatever is happening next. We have breathing in here. It may just be a matter of doing a good inhale and exhale. Allows you to free your mind. So I guess the question is, which Dane initially asked, is there a difference between the two? Which one comes first? Are you going to say the zanshin before you can go to mushin? Or is zanshin the result of mushin? Anyone want to touch this one?
I think they support each other, because when I train for zanshin, I use mushin. I put a person sitting down in mokuso, and then he has to close his eyes and be ready for an attack. He has to close his eyes at the person, the uger, walks around him and attacks him. So in mokuso, he is getting ready for mushin, and he's also getting ready for zanshin. So he's using his mokuso for zanshin and what was the other one? Zanshin and
we're dealing with zanshin and mushin right now.
yeah, mushin. Yes.
Eventually we'll get to zanshin, mokuso.
Yeah, they are very complicated on each other, but I think they support each other in training. They all support. I don't see them as different. I see them more as one supporting the other one.
Let me rephrase the question. if a person is in a state of zanshin, they're relaxed. Because I know Seki always told me and told other students, they were like, relax your body, relax your mind. You're too tight. You can't do anything if you're not relaxed. Is zanshin a precursor or prerequisite of effective mushin? Or is mushin just something that happens because the situation presents itself and you may be in the midst of doing something else? You're driving down the freeway and all of a sudden someone cuts in front of you, you got to stop fast, which you automatically do, which is mushin. But were you in a state of zanshin before the person cut in front of you?
I'll jump in to try to make it worse. So I think so in karate, a lot of times the way it's presented is around kata and the performance of the kata. So you would start off and you bow, and then the moment you've bowed, now the kata has begun. And at that moment, you need to be in mushin, and you need to be performing everything as though you're unaware and just reacting. And then when you finish your kata in your final movement, where you've ended this exchange, you pause in a state of readiness and alertness, and that's zanshin. And you hold that for a period before you stop your kata and then bow, ending your kata. And then you go back to normal life. So in that karate presentation, you're kind of just normal, then something happens and you're in mushin, you're done with that situation, but you're ready to have to go back into mushin again, sort of. So it's kind of like, I think zanshin in that sense is looked at like you're done doing with an empty mind, but you're ready to start doing again with an empty mind. And now where it gets funny is, I think, if this is a real life situation and I've dispatched this first opponent and I was in mushin to do it, but now I'm in this state of zanshin where I'm ready and I'm like, well, where are his friends? Is there somebody else coming? What else is going to happen now? Am I going to get hit by a car? Where am I? Like all of that. And then something happens, you're in mushin again, right? So in that case, you're kind of always in zanshin when you're, another one of the precepts is that when you leave your house, always imagine that you're surrounded by thousands of opponents everywhere you go. So that's kind of zanshin, right? Like everywhere you go, you're just like ready for somebody to attack you. Then when they attack you, I think you have to be empty. So I don't know. So long story short, I'm very confused and don't know, but I'm starting to think that it is, you should always be in zanshin. When something happens, you're in mushin, and then you should go back to zanshin. Is that, was everybody else?
Can you hear me?
Who is it? Who is that?
That was Ernie.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I had some microphone issues in a previous call, but I wanted to respectfully disagree.
Okay.
I thought your last example. Yeah, I thought your last example was perfect. That is zanshin, but it's not no mind. It's an empty mind that you're concentrating on the environment. And going back to whoever mentioned driving down a road, have you ever driven down a road and you went down 3 or 4 miles and you don't remember any of it? You don't remember nothing. That's no mind. That's not zanshin. That's mushin. That's no mind. But if a car suddenly cut in front of you, then that's zanshin. You're going to be empty of all other distractions and just concentrating on the situation at hand. And when you talk about the kata is not no mind. You have to have an empty mind, which is the reverse, right? Or all the distractions are gone. But when you stop the kata, and you breathe, and then you're ready. That's back to mushin, no mind. So maybe I need to look at the definitions, the translations of those definitions better. But I thought what you were saying about the kata was just the opposite of what you meant. The example was great, but I thought the zanshin was when you were doing the kata.
Okay.
I'll jump in. I'll jump in, Ernie. Ernest, I agree with your perspective from that standpoint. What you just said. There's more to it than just mushin and zanshin. But let me just start with those two. You have your mokuso, right? And for me, that's your ability to prepare to help and get you to no mind in mushin. And then in simple terms, beyond the no mind, you should always have zanshin, which is, being prepared in a sense, right? But there's 5 spirits of Budo, right? We need to make sure that we're bringing all of those into perspective here. You have your mushin and zanshin, which is what we're talking about, but you also have your shoshin, so that's the beginner's mind, right? And then you have your Budoshin, that's the immovable mind, and then you have your ascension, which is the purified spirit. So there's more to it than just the two that we're relating to here, or that we're talking about. It's a bigger picture, but from Ernest's perspective, and not that Dane was completely off track with it, in his interpretation of it. But I certainly relate to a little bit more of where Ernest came from in his perspective of mushin versus zanshin.
Okay, let me toss a few cents in here, and I'm gonna go back to Ernest because he gave me a clue. We practice kata to get a technique down or movements down to where they become automatic for us. That same analogy applies to if a person, you're on the freeway and they cut in front of you because you learned the kata of how to brake quickly, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you need to shift into the other lane where they were at. Both of those moves are kata. Okay. And if you were previously just driving down the freeway in that lane, no thinking going on, to an extent, that's mushin. Because at the end of your drive to work, you won't remember all the little things you did, because there was no mental effort involved, because you were doing a whole bunch of kata. However, I think also because you're not thinking about what you're doing, your mind maybe is also in a state of zanshin, or it's relaxed or empty, which allows you to perceive the car that's cutting in front of you and take preventive action, hopefully, which is, yes, that's mushin. Okay, so I don't know if, and I do thank you, Ernie, for this, because this it's a great analogy to have to ponder through. Is this saying that they're both interdependent upon each other, that mushin and zanshin are both interdependent? You have to have an empty mind so that your mind can react quickly to an unknown situation. And at that point, the mushin kicks in. Am I making sense, or?
I still think
Absolutely.
that the mushin is no thought, right? So the part of driving down the road and not being aware of what's going on in whatever instance you want to give it, excuse me, no thought, whatever the example is, I'm driving. I have no thought of a daily routine, whatever my kata is. But the minute you start to respond or react to something, that is the act of your empty mind. That's where you started with the no mind in mushin. But to respond and be prepared to respond to an event is zanshin, the being that you were prepared to respond in an effort to whatever it might have been.
So I'm thinking, I like this car analogy. So I'm starting to. So I'm thinking okay, so you're driving in the car in the state of motion. You're doing that. First off, I want to make it clear that is different than not paying attention. So if you're not paying attention, that's not mushin. Just to make that clear. You have to be like driving very well, but you're not aware of your driving, right? You know, you're doing everything right. You're going where you need to be going. You're not paying attention. You're doing it perfectly without being aware of the attention you're paying. So then that's mushin, because you're also not expecting anything. So you're in mushin now, and you're just executing driving mindlessly, but perfectly. Now a car cuts you off, it's an inch in front of you, and you avoid it perfectly. You've done that using mushin. You were in a state of mushin while you deftly avoided that. Now you're in a state of zanshin because you're like, oh crap, is that car going to flip over and hit me? Is another car going to react and pull out in front of me? What are the repercussions? What now is going on around me? And you're in a state of zanshin because of that. Now that car flips over and comes in front of you, and you avoid it again. You've avoided it in a state of mushin, even though you're in zanshin. I think in that case, mushin is a subset of zanshin, where you're in a state of, I am ready for cars to start flipping out in front of me now, but I have to not be aware of that, or you can't be stiff now. You can't like react ahead of time. You still have to be in mushin. And then I think from that point on in your day, you don't have any chance but being in zanshin. From then on, when you're driving in a state of zanshin every day, I think. I think from that point on, even though you're going to drive and exhibit mushin and drive perfectly and not be focused and not be all that stuff, I think you're also going to be now expecting cars to jump out in front of you constantly. So I don't know if that helps. Does that make any sense or make it worse?
It's the one that could you think it like this, that you in zanshin you are waiting for it. You know there's coming an attack, but you are in a ready defend mind. But in mushin, you do it automatically out of learned technique. But in zanshin, you know you are knowledgeable that there's coming an attack, probably coming a new attack on you. You're in a state of mushin, you have to execute in mushin, but you are knowledgeable about a new coming attack in zanshin.
Okay, let me interject a third factor here, because someone once said a long time ago, two's company, three's a crowd. At the end, if you're involved in defending yourself or you finished a kata, and I've noticed it more obviously in some karate styles, the person will retract to a ready position, tachiwaza, and they will exhale. And you'll notice their body relaxes. Okay. They take a breath, which is probably one of the best things you can do if you're in a really tight situation. Is take a breath, breathe, and when does this breath or breathing occur? Once the unexpected happens and you've hopefully been successful in dealing with it. The car cut in front of you, hit the center divider, flips over. However, you braked and you stopped and you saved your life. Okay, and you exhale, and most people will unconsciously exhale, and say whether it includes a expletive. They may say, oh, or make some comment about the other person who's screwed up your morning driving to work. That exhale, that breathing is there. So I guess my next question is, does that exhale or breathing serve as mokuso, clearing your mind. Okay. What is the purpose of that breath at the end of a kata, or at the end of, the person on the street attacked you, you defeat them, and you step back in your ready position, and you just, for some people, it's just an exhale.
It does help you reset, Sensei. It does. And that does put you back into the state of mind of mushin, in my opinion. And here's another thing that I think may help clarify some of what our debate is here on the difference of mushin and zanshin, as we've said. Mushin as the no mind, right? But zanshin is also defined as a state of lingering mind. So and I think what Ernest was saying as well, is if you're in a state of no mind, mushin, right? The minute you start to react or respond to something, and you're capable of doing that, you were prepared to do those type of things. But then your mind is in a lingering position to where it continues to be in that state until you do what you just said, and then reset yourself to go back to the mushin state of mind.
Okay, let's see if we can do anything with.
Because remember, the zanshin part is lingering. So after once you activate that, so to speak, then you're kind of you've acted on something, and you were capable of acting on something because you were in a zanshin state of mind.
Okay, see if we can bring this to some sort of a conclusion here, or something, or similarities. If mushin equals no mind, which means there's no conscious effort going on in terms of what you're doing, and zanshin is empty mind, that your mind is ready for whatever is going to happen next, and mokuso is clearing your mind. So you can think. Is that an adequate way of explaining them or relating them to each other? Which is,
I don't think that they are mutually exclusive. The empty mind is, I'm not preoccupied by something else. Auto accidents happen often when somebody is not paying attention to what's going on in the road, but they are arguing with their boss, or
Excuse me, you have another device close to you.
I've got double audio here.
One of your devices.
we're getting some feedback from somewhere.
I was trying to be,
Thomas, I think you might have another device around it. You might need to turn the volume down.
yeah, I was trying to be respectful.
I think it's
Can you hear me
John.
now?
John might have an open mic.
Can everyone who's not talking just mute?
Okay,
So what other device would be echoing me? Oh, no echo. Okay.
good.
What I was trying to say is if you have an empty mind, there's a word, a term, I don't know what the Japanese term for it would be, but it's the preoccupied mind, the mind that's thinking about something else, driving down the road and I'm arguing with my boss, or used to before I retired. And that gets in the way of paying attention to what's going on. But the mushin get away from the Japanese term, the physiological aspect of it is I don't have to have something go all the way up through my brain, process it, think it through, decide what to do, and then do something. That the automatic response after multiple years of practice is it's all done in the spinal cord. It never gets to the brain and doesn't have to be processed and thought through, which is a really slow process. That's mushin. I don't think about it. Same thing. Since I retired, I took the piano back up again, and there are things where I'm playing. If I think about it, my fingers don't remember what to do. If I don't think about it, they know exactly what to do because it's not going on in my head. Zanshin is just being aware and not being preoccupied with something else. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I also think there's another term missing, which is I'm too preoccupied with something that isn't pertinent to what I'm doing right now.
I think in English they call it unfettered, right? That's the unfettered mind. I can't think of what that's called in Japanese, right? You're talking about like a
Yes.
fettered mind, I guess the opposite of that, right? Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, we didn't talk about that. Totally. I agree. Yeah, that's very important too. And that idea, exactly. I think you're totally right about mushin is acting without thinking about your actions in a way. Yeah, yeah, totally. What do you think about zanshin? It seems like it's an awareness while being unaware in sorts, right? I agree they're not exclusive either, but
yeah, open to everything that's going on around me, but not focused on one thing. And particularly not focused on something that isn't going on around me.
Right.
Excellent definition. Thank you, Thomas. I'm gonna have to find out what that preoccupied mind is in one word, because I think that may be, how do you say, that may be the missing link, for lack of a better phrase. I'm sure there is a word, a Japanese word that deals with the preoccupied mind.
I think the beginner's mind is considered like the way to fix that, right? I just can't think of what that mind is called.
Yeah.
Either. I agree. Like, I don't know what it's called when you are preoccupied, but I think it's that beginner's mind that Darren was talking about earlier that is the cure for it, right?
Yeah.
Or I might be misremembering, but yeah, that you're right. It's totally important.
Yeah, because the preoccupied mind is the greatest danger in any critical situation. That's what's going to get you killed. Whether you're driving a car, defending yourself.
That's a great point. We talk a lot about the ought, like what your mind ought to be like during these things, but I think it's very important to talk about what your mind likely will be like during these things, right? And it will be preoccupied. Like, you were in the middle of thinking about your boss. You were in the middle of thinking about something at work when somebody attacks you. You're not always walking around thinking I might get attacked right now and peacefully breathing, waiting for it, right? You're mad about something. You're late to something.
Right. Darren, if you could send that to me as an email, I'd appreciate it. Not right now, but Darren sent me the 5 steps, or so if you can send that to me later on.
Oh, and real quick, I absolutely, I do agree. I think that mokuso is as simple as exhaling, like you mentioned. I think when there's always the difference between training and doing, right? And I think when you practice mokuso, you kneel in seiza and you hold your hands together and you overlap your big toe and you do all of that and you stare off into space for 20 minutes. But you need to be able to do it in a single exhale when you're in the middle of life, right?
Yeah.
I think like doing it for real is breathing and emptying your mind in 1 second, for sure.
Right, because I mean, if any of you have fired a handgun or long gun, or you know that you exhale as you fire, because that relaxes your body. You keep better aim, better control of the weapon, etc. If you inhale as you fire, you tend to have less control of the weapon. Okay. So I guess like
This kind of brings up a future topic, I think, in general about ki,
okay,
right? And its importance in all of this, because breathing and exhaling, I mean, that's a ki, right? So, which is key. And I think we already have something down the pike about that in the future somewhere, but that's a good part to add to that.
Yeah, if you
so-
shoot if you shoot a gun, you also have to have the ends in mind, because if you are afraid of the bang that is coming when you shoot the gun, then you lift your hand a bit upwards when you shoot. So you should also be in a state of mushin when you shoot. That's exactly the same as doing a technique.
One additional thing I'm going to mention, and I know I've mentioned it before, but it has to do with mushin, and Thomas mentioned that, you know, when you're mushin, it's all in your spinal cord. I mean, I think it reaches your brain, but your brain is pre-programmed, so it takes care of it automatically. The brain cells just connect. Because I think I've mentioned before, there is a time lapse of something like 0.4 to 1.5 seconds time lapse between your brain recognizing something and your body being able to execute something in response. And I don't know if some of the material that Larry sent me recently or read elsewhere, where it says the criminal actually has a time advantage over you if you aren't trained in how to respond to certain situations. A criminal, their action is going to maybe take 3 to 7/10 of a second to do. And your response is going to be anywhere from maybe 4 or 5/10 of a second to 1.5 seconds if you're not trained. And that creates a critical gap that can be fatal.
Sensei, isn't that why we use strikes before we do a joint lock?
It's a
Use
distraction.
strikes to gain that temporal advantage.
Yes, it's a distraction. I know in Budoshin Jujitsu, we don't care whether a hit is effective or not. Its main intent is to be a distraction for whatever else we're doing. Or it may even be your zippers down. You know, it can be verbal as well as physical, because all you're trying to do is create that distraction that messes up with their ability to respond to you.
Sensei Kirby, that's why we use a lot of visualization techniques.
Yeah.
You want to put yourself mentally in that position, so when and if it happens to you, you already know, you've already programmed yourself how you're going to respond to this. So it's not a foreign, you don't have to then decide. It helps the reaction time. It speeds up the reaction time, really, what it does. And you put yourself in those situations, because yes, there's a reaction time. It's anywhere from 3 to, I don't have the number in front of me. I don't remember what it is exactly, but it's up to 3/4 of a second. Your reaction time. Someone made an attack on you. They made a threat towards you. You have to recognize that. You have to process it. You have to decide what action you're going to take, and that's up to 3/4 of a second sometimes. So to speed up that reaction time, that speed up that process, you want to practice those visualization techniques. So those, we do that on a regular basis. What if this, what if that? And that's something consistent with professional athletes, Olympic athletes, top performers. They play through every contingency beforehand. So when that takes place, you just automatically go there because you've already decided in your mind what you're going to do. Yeah, we do this all the time. If you're riding with a partner in the car, okay, partner, if this happens, this is how I'm going to react. What are you going to do? I'm 5'6", so I go low, right? You got the high, I go for the legs. So that's kind of a given. When you have those conversations, what if we roll into an ambush? What if this happens? What if that guy comes out? And you talk about these things over and over again. That's the value of having a good partner, is because you know how each other's going to react. I went through a door one time. I was the first one through a door. I had to kick the door, went in, and I had a backup, and it was on my ankle. Well, the holster was getting a little old, and the Velcro that was securing it gave way, right? And therefore, as I'm going through the door goes, I'm making entry, my first step, and the gun falls right. That's a bad combination, right? Okay, what else can go wrong? And a series of additional events went wrong, and it made a very entertaining story. But I was like, I got to secure this gun. I can't have a loose gun at the scene. So I go down on my knees. My partner, who I've been working with for some time, just steps over me, and he goes right away to the left. I picked it up, and in one move, it's in my back pocket, and I'm back in the game. So these are the things you have to contend for. And then there's no way you would have anticipated that. There was no way visualization on that. But just the idea of training in other situations, when something happens, and it may not be the exact situation, you're able to flow off of that. You're able to bounce off that and adjust relatively quickly. So it makes it it all comes back together. All this stuff is interrelated. It really is. Good times, right?
Yeah, but that's what I said. But and I've said it before, it's so critical to have real, if you're training your students or even for yourself, it's so critical to have real life situations. And that doesn't mean you tell your training partner, come at me with a double hit or grab my lapel, because then what's going to happen, but they just randomly attack you. And it's that ability to deal with random situations that's going to save you. And if you are skilled in any skill, it may be a matter of, if you're skilled in cooking, you know exactly what to do. If a frying pan catches fire, what's the fastest thing to do? If the top is available, put the top on the frying pan.
Stop.
Okay, it'll smother itself out. If you don't, how many of you have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen? I mean, these are things, you would just, I wouldn't attempt to turn off the gas or electricity. I would go for the fire extinguisher, because the control for that, turning the gas or electricity on or off, may be too close to the frying pan. So you have to, as Larry said, if you know what you're going to do and have discussed it enough and have practiced it enough, it becomes an automatic reaction. And yes, sometimes it's not the right automatic reaction, but the alternative is a lot worse for you. So the mushin is fantastic. And it works best if you're in a state of zanshin, so to speak, where your mind is relaxed. Because then those brain cells will just automatically connect and life goes on.
You just touched on something too that brings it back to the very first topic about, is martial arts training for everywhere else in your life and all of that kind of thing. And it just dawned on me as you're talking about just the idea of being excellent at anything, whether you're a cook or whatever it is, martial arts, cooking, music. We got the term kung fu, back in the 1960s or whatever. And in our minds, that means Chinese martial arts, and people that are good at kung fu are Chinese martial arts masters. But the word kung fu just means you're good at something.
Right.
You have good kung fu. You are not good at kung fu. You have good kung fu. Like this fighter has good kung fu. This cook has good kung fu. This shoemaker has good kung fu.
Right.
You know, and that came to mean to us specifically the fighting arts, but it's anything. You're a master of kung fu if you mastered anything. So it's kind of like kung fu really means the ability to master something in a way. And that it's kind of what you're touching on earlier, like mastery of something sort of translates into mastery of mastering things. It's like mastery of mastery
Right.
in a way.
I think part of this for me comes from I don't care what a person does for a living, as long as they do it well. And I think that comes from when I was in high school. I worked in a custom machine shop. This is back 59 through 62. The guy dropped out of school in 8th grade to help support his family. In 1960, he had a 6-figure income. Wow. I mean, he had a brilliant mind. And one of the hard things for me to get my students to understand in high school is that the amount of education you have can be important, but it's your innate skills that are going to determine whether you are successful or not.
What you're taught's not as important as what you learn.
It's what you've learned, whether you're able to use it. My daughter, okay, she's got a bachelor's degree. She also, while she was in college, she became a night manager at Walmart. That skill, that management skill, has probably served her better in getting higher paid jobs than her degree, because she knows how to manage people. And she's willing to jump in and help them if it's necessary. She has no qualms about doing that, where some managers will say, you need to do this and you need to do that, and if you can't get it done, tough luck, you're out of here. That's part of her personality. And so if I run into someone who is a student of mine, and okay, their service manager at Toyota, has happened about a month ago. If the guy, if he's doing well, I respect him for what he's doing. You have to, and that's maybe where the word respect comes from. You have to accept people as they are. And my assumption is that most people are trying to do the best they can at whatever job profession they're in. If they aren't, they should retire or go do something else. I mean, there were some teachers that were over the hill, and school teachers that were over the hill when they were in their 40s. And they were just sticking around. I don't know what for. Good retirement benefits. But I think that's part of our, again, going back to the first topic, you have to accept people as they are. You have to accept situations as they are. You can't say this situation is wrong. If you're not going to do anything about it, you haven't done anything. Once you even if you're in a lousy situation, you have to accept it, because that allows you to then turn around and hopefully do something to fix it. But if you don't accept it, you're not facing the reality. You're facing a reality. Whether it's right or wrong is secondary. And that's I guess that's part of my psychological outlook. And I think part of it comes from the martial arts. I think part of it comes from my experiences with dealing with people. For me, it's easier to respect people and treat them at least as equal as I am. it just goes through a whole bunch of what I call, it avoids a whole lot of what I call PITA things, pain in the derriere. Because some people play games, and it's, you know, I prefer not to do that. It's too much work. Then you have to pick up the pieces. And I think, like as Larry said, the situation in law enforcement, if I had to deal with a adult or high school gang member on campus, and it was a junior high school, you have to be very straight up with them. And they will respect that. They may not like it, but they will respect it. And if you can do it in a calm voice, and you sound relatively confident, you're going to have a better chance of coming out okay. And it may be just a matter of getting them to turn around and walk away, but that's better than having them, you know, try to attack you. I think as Ernest said early on, you know, to be able to walk away. I don't know, maybe it was Ernest or maybe so. The ability to walk away from something without a physical conflict is a great accomplishment for a martial artist, because that's part of the philosophy. You don't have to prove yourself. And if people see you are confident, they're more likely to go along with what you're saying or doing. And then we can get into the great leaders of the world, etc. That's a whole different ballgame. But anyway,
Yeah, I think it's a great point you mentioned there about like kind of respecting everybody of every background and every job and all of that, especially as a martial arts philosophy. Like that's kind of the whole, when Kano adopted the judo gi and white belts and all of that, part of it is so when you're in the dojo, you're absolutely equal. You're all wearing the same thing. You're
Right.
all wearing the same uniform. And back then it's the same brand. Like you don't even have a nicer one than anyone has. You know, it doesn't matter anything about your life outside of the dojo. Your life is only who you are there. And, you know, you are respected by your contributions there, not outside of there.
right.
You know, that's an interesting way to do respect. It's like respect irrespective of who you think you are. You know, it's like the respect for who you really are.
And I think bringing up the uniform issue is, you know, everyone is the same. We're all treated equally. I mean, I don't care whether I've got a white belt or a black belt, they're going to be treated with the same amount of respect. Because they're human beings. I mean, that's why I have a uniform requirement. And I have one student who, one week he wore his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gi with all the frou-frou on it. And he has a regular judo gi. And I said, where's your gi? He said, it's dirty. I said, okay. This week he came back with the same Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gi. I asked him, I said, where's your gi? He said, well, it's dirty. I said, maybe you need to wash it. This guy's in his 40s.
Yeah. Time for a spare.
I think it is so important for, and I don't know whether it's gone by the wayside somewhat, but it's so important for a dojo to have a consistent uniform. It does a number of things. Shows the students have respect for the class, for the art, yada yada yada. But more important, if someone looks in, a passerby walks into the dojo and sees 20 different uniforms, what does that say? It would be like, I'm going to pick on Larry here in his past profession. If all the officers wore whatever they wanted, okay, like in the Wild West, what does that do to the integrity and respect for the law enforcement agencies?
Yeah, you want things to be uniform. It's a paramilitary culture for sure.
It is.
And when you get into that, it's the same thing what they do in any of the military branches of the boot camp. They break you down, they shave everyone's head, they take away your jewelry, your clothing, your gym shoes, all those things that give kind of status recognition that other people will defer to socially, right? Those social elements will defer to. So they break everyone is the same, and then everyone is built up. By the end of that, 3-month period, whatever it may be, whatever branch of the service that they're dealing with. By the end of that, the people's character is what propels him forward, and gives everyone the chance for that leadership to develop, that natural leadership to develop, and it breaks down those social economic barriers. And the military has been doing that for years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's that. For those of you who haven't recognized that in the dojo, some of that plays out in the dojo by requiring that everybody have the same uniform. It shows unity, it shows respect. It puts everybody at the same level, as at least when they start out. And that's to me, that is so important. I'm still fighting a battle with some of my lower ranks to get them to tie their belt correctly. And although that really annoys me, I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, you know how to tie your shoelaces, unless you're using Velcro. And some shoes you don't have to tie the laces on anymore. Okay. There are laces that don't have to be tied.
Finally,
Technology marches on, but in Seki's class, you wore a gi. Second week, you were expected to know how to tie your belt correctly, or the wrath of hell, came down upon you. Can't do that anymore. But they will get there. But they need to, it's one of those things that, tying your belt correctly indicates respect for the dojo and the art, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I did a seminar a couple of decades ago, someplace in the Southeast. And a student, green belt was in the dojo, says, "Sensei, why are you wearing the death knot?" I'd never known the knot that Seki taught us, et cetera, was known as the death knot. And I knew I had it, it's a 7th or 8th time or 6th. I knew I had to come up with an answer that made sense. So I said, well, the reason you wear it, you wear that in Budoshin Jujitsu is because this is a mythology now. It's in the next book if I ever get a publisher. The reason you wear a death knot is because you are committed to your death to protect yourself from injury. And somehow that's stuck. And I've heard that same explanation from other sensei now, and some of others in other martial arts that wear the quote unquote death knot. And it's funny to me, I mean, it's obviously any martial artist is going to protect themselves to their death. Any human will. But it's just funny. It's funny to me how a myth has become accepted. And
what makes it the death knot?
pardon?
What version of belt tying is that? What makes it the death knot? I'm not familiar.
You end up, if you look in my student handbook, there's a couple pictures in on how to tie your belt, and you end up with an arrow pointing to the right. I believe it is. It's somewhat of a square knot.
Gotcha. It's just the point pointing the other way.
Yes, the point
where it's like a I got you.
And the belts are down rather than up, and surprisingly, that is the same knot. When back in the 70s, I was late 60s, 70s, I was into backpacking, and one of the things I learned how to do was rappel down a cliff or up a cliff, as the case may be. And you wore a nylon web, they called it a diaper, and everybody had their own diaper. Today they're anyone can use the same diaper. You connect them with Velcro, life goes on. But everybody had their own diaper because it fit them. And the knot you tied was the death knot, tied in and of itself a second time. And the only way to undo that knot was to cut it. You could not undo that knot. Anyway, I mean, that's a bit of additional, that was accurate information, but it somehow has also become part of the mythology. But what can I say? But anyway, having a common uniform in the dojo is so important. Even if it's blue jeans and a white t-shirt, it doesn't matter what it is, it's that it should be consistent. So anyway, and that, that has to do with respect, which goes back to the first topic. We look at kids. I mean, some people, how do you say? Some people look at kids and say, how can they dress that way? And I learned a long time ago not to worry about it, because styles change. Back in the 70s, when we said halter tops came out for girls, this one teacher male teacher kept sending girls out because he thought their tops were inappropriate. And the principal, who was very pro teacher, finally calls a meeting school with me. He says, look, he says, first of all, boys have seen a lot more outside of school. Secondly, that's the style. If it bothers you, you need to seek professional help. He was also the first principal in the high school district to allow girls to wear pants at school, because he said, this is in the 60s and 70s, skirts were mini skirts, and he says a girl can't get a drink of water without having a population on this campus getting overly excited. And he says, and you can't find longer skirts anywhere on the market. So as of tomorrow, girls can wear pants. And he got some flack from the district for it. But eventually the district saw the wisdom of what he said. So if you, I guess, where does this go? Is it side story? But it's a matter of, I think, respect and accept. You have to an extent, accept certain realities. But anyway, I sidetracked here. I'm sorry.
Sensei, if I can, one quick comment as it's related to the uniform, and I think you just gave me a little bit more leeway than what I was hoping and opened my mouth prior to. So with the last example, first and foremost, I completely agree with the uniform being consistent and what you have inside of a dojo. That is truly my belief, and I believe that has all the significance of what was stated by everyone. However, in today's time, I also believe that there's reason for us to continue to evolve. And in today's society, in modern times, people want their own identity. They want to, and whatever it is, the smallest things, even a uniform can have them engaged in participating in class, but it could also have them disengaged because they particularly don't care, because they don't understand at the moment of what they're doing with the uniform or what the significance of a uniform is during the class. For me, I like to try to continue to evolve to make sure that we retain as many people, as many practitioners as we possibly can. And even though it's a uniform, there is significance with that individually to other people. The part about tying the belt or putting the gi top on and making sure the left is over the right side and what the significance is behind those things are very important, and that's not wavered. However, I do allow others the opportunity to wear what gi they want to wear during the class. with the exception of them understanding that during a normal class, it's fine to wear a gi, wear it appropriately. That includes every aspect of it during a normal class. But when we have a formal event, you can have whatever gi you want to, as long as you have a white gi that you participate in formal events with. You get a white gi first. I don't care what gi you have and what gi you wear during a normal class. But when we have a formal event, everyone wears the same gi, the same uniform, the same color.
Okay.
And that's how we approach it.
You have a standard,
Yes, Sensei.
and that's what's important. You have a standard. I know that with the MMA, BJJ clothing, there are lots of variations. For a while, I had a student who every week he showed up in a different color kung fu outfit. He had taken kung fu. Let's not ruin the phrase. And I finally said to him, I said, I just got frustrated. I said, you know, this is not a circus. You should, you know, either wear street clothes or get a white judo gi. He dropped out, I guess, because he didn't want to conform. But I think, you know, if you know you have a standard, and as long as that standard is there and everyone understands it, you're okay. I know that some of the MMA outfits advertise every product under the sun, and even though you know they're close fitting, and I understand the rationale for that, the close fitting, but not all the advertising. But without all the advertising, they look really boring. And as long as you know that's the product, you're going to have 20 different students with 20 different. They're identical uniforms, but their surface coloration or whatever you want to call it is different because they're sold by different companies, or there's some Brazilian jiu-jitsu gi that say jiu-jitsu down one arm and Brazilian up the other, and that to an extent that's the nature of the animal, and if the sensei allows it, as long as the sensei has a standard. Your standard is if there's a formal event, you all wear white gi. If we're just practicing, I don't think they're saying I don't care what you're wearing, but you have a criteria for regular practice. Okay, and that's okay. I mean, there are times when I will tell my students next week, wear street clothes, something you don't mind having torn. And they do. And I say, well, bring your gi, at least bring your gi top, just in case. And I said, bring 2 or 3 tops in case. But I think as long as you have a consistent standard, you're okay. Because people may ask, what do I wear here? And I know you're not going to say, I don't care. I've had ladies show up, for self-defense class, sometimes for jiu-jitsu the first week, and they're wearing, the thin spaghetti straps. And the first question I'll ask them is, do you have a t-shirt? No offense, but do you have a t-shirt? I said, you can't. You could train, but it's going to be embarrassing. I don't say that's them, but I'll ask, do you have a t-shirt? Because the straps aren't appropriate, and that's a safety factor as well at that point. And I'm sure that's a factor for you as well, So anyway, but it all comes back to respecting the dojo, respecting the art, respecting the wishes of the sensei. and having a standard. And if you know, I don't want to get into standards here, but if you know, that's part of the respect issue. And you've all been through it as students. So anyway, we have, I think we've hit zanshin, mushin, mokuso fairly effectively. So does anyone want to say anything to close up mokuso, zanshin, and mushin, or close up martial artist outside the dojo, or because we're at 9:35 already. Anybody want to say anything in conclusion, or provide a revelation for the rest of us, or maybe a topic for future seminars?
Only that I did see the chat. So thank you, Darren, for putting that the 5 levels in the chat.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
It's like,
I'm not that familiar with chat. I'm an old geese. I have to get up with some of this current technology.
Professor, you asked them to send you an email, so you got it covered. You don't have to worry about the chat.
But that's but I'm getting increasing flack from people saying, well, I don't do email, just send me a text, or
You're very welcome.
so I'm starting to send text, on rare occasion, if I know the person. It's kind of like Facebook. They say, why don't you do Facebook? I say, I'll do Facebook with people I know, but that's it. And so technology marches on, and maybe I have to as well. So if no one else has anything to say about these topics, I think we're going to stop at this point. The next time,
Sensei, I'd like to jump in for just a moment and thank Ernest for participating today. It's great to meet you, Ernest, even if it is only over Zoom. And we're happy you're here.
yes,
Thank you. Thank you
My
very
first
much.
time is seeing you on Zoom, so I'm glad you feel welcome, and thank you for being here, participating.
yes.
All right. It won't be the last time.
Good,
Excellent.
good.
Great.
And our next topics will be what arts, if any, will help evolve or change your jujitsu? What is jushin? And bullying in public in the martial arts. So we will try and hit those 3 topics next time, which is, I believe, on the 18th of February. So if any of you have any additional topics, please get those to me, because this long list is frustrating some people, but that's okay. Because I've had to tell some people, your topic is going to come up in about 4 months. You say, do I have to wait that long? And I say, well, if someone who participates regularly also wants the topic moved up, I'll move it up. So, but it takes, in my book, it takes at least 2 or 3 people to move a topic up. So anyway, if you have strong feelings about something, let me know. Anyway, hope you have a good day. Please stay away from Mount Washington and New Hampshire. At least for
100 degrees below 0.
108, yeah. At least I would put a chill in your ears if they don't fall off.
Sensei, the flip side of that is we opened our windows this morning in Florida so we could have a fire in the fireplace.
Yeah, we may hit a high today in the low to mid 60s, something like that. The people,
Jealous. Yeah. East Coast is a little cold today.
I'm single digits here.
people are, this is Southern California. We have a different reality. People are complaining it's cold. I know when I used to backpack, we used to think 60s was warm or hot. You don't want to backpack in anything above 65. It's hot. Anyway, enough of that. Have a great week. Thomas, thank you for joining us. Johnny, Ernie, Larry, John Castellan, who's, I don't know if you're really there or not. Darren, who else is with us this week?
I'm here, just been having technical difficulties.
Okay. Dane and Dave, thank you for being with us. And for those of you that are regulars, I really appreciate it. And for those of you who this is your first or second time, please come back again. We need your input. Variety is the spice of life. So anyway, take care and we'll see you.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.